Welcome back to the DSR channel, and I am continuing with the series on the rogues. This is going to be on the Soulknife rogue subclass, where I'm going to review, do some analysis on it, and then rate it as a subclass and each of its features so you can have an idea of what you're getting into. As a reminder, I rate everything in relation to the 10 different roles I've defined, okay? To me, it doesn't make sense to rank something without this, because if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish with the thing, how can you say that it's going to do well at it, right? Um, there are a lot of features that are good for some things and not other things. There's a lot of classes that are good for some things and not other things. And so I think that also brings in the rater's bias even more. And surely there's still some bias. I still have some bias involved in things based on my own point of view, my own experience, the things I like to do. But this way I found removes my bias more than if I just gave a singular rating for something. So these are the 10 different ones. I have a whole series of videos explaining what these are and how I define them. And these are not to say that there's an ideal party composition, that you need any specific kind of role in the party. You do not. You do not need any of these roles, any one of these roles. I mean, surely you'll be in some of these roles, whatever you choose as your build for your character. Um, but the columns 3, 4, and 5 kind of define high level, like what does it mean to be in this role. The last column is just kind of the stereotypical default classic example of a class that fills that kind of role. Okay, that does not mean that is the only class that can do it. That does not mean that if you choose that class, you have to do it. But as I always say, if you choose one of these classes and do not tell the other players that you are not going to play that role, then you're causing a problem, right? You do need to tell the other players. That's the only thing that's really required, is that you have a discussion with the other players before session one where you tell them, guys, this is my role, right? I'm a cleric, but I'm not going to play a healer. I'm a fighter, but I'm not a frontliner. I'm going to be an archer, right? They need to know that. And you all need to discuss it as a group to make sure that your party's going to work together, or that you have strategies to make it all work together, whatever that's going to be. Whether that's some people change their classes to adjust, some people change their roles to adjust, or you just all come up with creative strategies and tactics in combat to handle it, right? You can play a party that's nothing but skirmishers. You can play a party that's nothing but range, as long as you have plans to make that work. And that's all that's required, is that you discuss it as a party to make sure that you all are going to have the most fun you possibly can. And this is my 5th month doing this YouTube channel. It has been a crazy ride. I really appreciate everybody who's been along the ride with me and the support. And if you like this kind of content and want to support it, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference, probably a lot more than you think. I've got over 150 videos now, and I'm not even close to the baseline of the content I want to get out there. And so I've started trying to organize this into playlists that'll be more accessible and easier to understand for you. I know maybe not every topic I cover is going to be interesting to every single person, and I don't expect that. So what I've tried to do is create topics by playlist so that when you are interested in a topic, you can just watch those videos on that topic, not feel like you have to watch my video that I produce every day, because I do one every day. So the kind of the high level structure is that I have, for every class, there is a playlist for just that class, and that's like the review, rate, rank that class. It's also the tactics videos on that class. It's any DPR calculations, comparisons on that class and subclasses, and that's the class videos. Then I also have a class builds. That's a separate playlist, so I can show you here. That's a separate playlist, and the idea is keep those all separate so that it doesn't become like a single playlist of like 20 or 30 or 50 videos. So I've got 8 of the rogue videos done. This is going to be number 9 now, and I've only done one rogue build video, and I'm going as fast as I can, one video a day, and I'm still not anywhere close to where I want to be. I've done better on the artificer, but that's because of the book Eberron, Forge of the Artificer. You can see there, yeah, I've got 14 Artificer videos and 7 Artificer build videos. So I've got a long way to go before I flesh all of this out. And Rogue is only like, what, my 3rd class video playlist that I've filled out. So lots to do. Let's get into the details of the Soulknife Rogue. As you can see, I've got on the left my ratings and rankings. There are 2 tables. The top table there is for the base class Rogue. And the base classes I treat as this is what you are, right? So I rank everything. I rank that class across all 10 of the roles and give you a score in each one of those. Then everything else for your build is additive. It adds to that, including subclasses. So subclasses isn't what you are, it's what you're adding to your base class. And same thing with feats and spells and everything else in the game. So the bottom table is the subclass where I'm rating the features of that subclass, and I'm giving those features a rating of how powerful I think that feature is on its own. And then at the end, I aggregate this all together and show you this is what, if you were to play this Soulknife Rogue, for example, this is what the ratings I would give of what you are at this point. And I thought that was important to break out because by the end, you'll see that it doesn't change a lot, which could be, I think, could leave a lot of people feeling confused. Like, well, is this not adding anything? I'll explain a little more when we get to the end. So I do rate the base classes by tier because they just have so many features. I didn't want the table to be like huge and just way too much to consume and way too much to fit on the screen. So I grouped the base class functionality ratings by tier of play. So level 4 for tier 1, level 10 for tier 2, level 16 for tier 3, and level 20 for tier 4. And that just aggregates and accumulates all the features you get by that level and what rating would I give them, what ranking would I give them in each of the 10 roles for that. But with the subclasses, I do it by level because they have fewer features, and that way you can see with more granular detail what each of the features is doing for you. All right, so the Soulknife Rogue, strike foes with psionic power. A Soulknife strikes with the mind, cutting through barriers both physical and psychic. These rogues discover psionic powers within themselves and channel it to do their roguish work. As a Soulknife, your psionic abilities might have haunted you since childhood, revealing their full potential only as you experience the stress of adventure. Or you might have sought out an order of psychic adepts and spent years learning how to manifest your power. So this is a very cool fantasy, one that I love. I've loved this kind of playstyle in fantasy since second edition, which is when they really started leaning into psionics. There was a little bit of psionics in first edition, but it was extremely minimal. There was no psionic class. There was no anyway. It was very very minimal. So very cool thing. I've loved it since second edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I was glad to see it in fifth edition. I saw it as homebrew before they added it with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I think it was right where they added this officially to fifth edition, and I'm glad to see it reprinted. They made some tweaks to make it better and work more cleanly. So let's move on to the level 3 features. All right, so the first feature you get at level 3 is Psionic Power. This is your resource for all of your psionic powers. What it is psionic energy dice. You spend them to do things. Some of those things that you spend them on have you roll the dice, and then that's the result you get. Kind of works like Bardic Inspiration dice in that sense. Um, it doesn't always roll the die, so sometimes you just spend it without rolling the die. I think there's some Bard features that do that as well. The difference between this and Bardic Inspiration is you do not get these back on a short rest, right? Bards get all of their Bardic Inspirations back on a short rest once they reach level 5. You get one back on a short rest and all of them back on a long rest. The number of dice you have scales by your rogue proficiency bonus, right? Yeah, the proficiency bonus. It's or the equivalent of the proficiency bonus. In the previous version, it specifically was tied to your proficiency bonus, but they went away from that so that you couldn't like multi-class out of this and then get the same benefits. In this case, it's specifically by rogue level now. So if you played both of this in the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything version and this version and just went straight class rogue, this would be identical. But if you multi-class, this one's going to be different than the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I think that makes sense so that you can't, take a 3-level dip and then still get a bunch of psionic energy dice just by getting to level 20 in other classes. The two features you can actually use with your psionic energy dice, I find these ones a little bit underwhelming for the Soulknife Rogue because you can't use any of them for your combat features, and you are a martial character, right? You're also a very good skill character, and this does lean into that. So you've got Psi Bolstered Knack, which says if you fail an ability check using a skill or tool with which you have proficiency, you can roll one psionic energy die and add the number rolled to the check, potentially turning failure into success. The die is expended only if the roll succeeds. This sub feature is probably the best one they get at third level. And it is great because it does double down on one of the core, features or core roles of a rogue, which is being good at ability checks. So that makes you a better scout. It makes you a better face. It also gives you better capability in the knowledge category, which is not really a role, but it's a functional category. That's why it's in purple. And it was very cool. It's just that it's kind of devalued by reliable talent. Now, the rogues always had reliable talent, but they moved it from level 11 to 7, and level of 7 is a lot more accessible than level 11. So once you get to level 7 and have reliable talent, note that reliable talent works on the exact same category of roles, right? If you're proficient with a skill or tool, you get reliable talent. And this is the same. If you're proficient with a skill or tool, you can use side bolstered knack. The problem is that reliable talent is probably going to make it so you just succeed most of the time anyway. And this is then by level 7 doing almost nothing for you. Now, before level 7, this is going to feel awesome because it is that psionic energy die added to your ability checks is going to make a big difference, right? And it is only expended if you don't still fail. So if you use the side bolstered knack, roll the die, and it still doesn't help you succeed, it still doesn't make you succeed, then you don't expend the die, and you can just keep trying. As long as you keep trying the ability checks, you can keep trying to use your psionic energy dice. So it's a solid boost until level 7, and then it's likely going to get rarely used because reliable talent's just going to make you succeed first, and then it won't matter. So I'm going to give this feature an A because in tier 1, when you get it, it is an A. It's a very good boost to something you're already good at, doubling down on being good at skills. And even at levels 5 and 6, it's still good. I would still give it an A. But once you hit level 7 and have reliable talent, this probably drops to a C in value. Yeah, probably. All right, next feature is the Psychic Whispers. This one just lets you have telepathy. It's a little bit strange in that you just don't have telepathy all the time. It also has the longest range of telepathy of any kind of telepathy except Rary's telepathic bond and the telepathy spells. Those have a greater range, and that's a 5th and 7th level, if I recall correctly, 7th level spell. This has a better range of telepathy than even the Scion class that's currently in the UA, and that bothers me. Even better than the Telepath subclass of the Scion. This rogue has a better telepathic range because it has a range of 1 mile. Now you can connect to multiple creatures, right? All the other forms of telepathy is generally connect to one creature at a time and have a telepathic conversation with them. This one is multiple creatures equal to your proficiency bonus, which is interesting. Almost everywhere they've removed proficiency bonus from base classes and subclasses, and they left it into this one. Now that's not like a big differentiator, but it is interesting. So number of creatures equal to proficiency bonus. You roll a psionic energy die. This is one of those awkward ones where I feel like they were crowbarring in, like we got to make them roll. So you roll psionic energy die, and it lasts for a number of hours equal to the number rolled. So you're rolling for the duration, which is kind of weird. Like why in this instance it only lasted 1 hour. In this instance, it lasted 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. The range is always the same, 1 mile. But it is one of the best forms of telepathy in the game. So this one's pretty good. Now, telepathy is something that can be useful, but it doesn't really fall into any of these role categories is what is going to be good for you, right? Like it can contribute as a face because telepathy basically ignores language. If you can speak to somebody telepathically, and it doesn't have a limiter on it, which this one doesn't, like some of them will say you must share a language. This one doesn't say you must share a language. So you can literally talk to any creature. Some of them even say that they must speak at least any language, and this one doesn't even say that. So you could talk to beasts using it. Yeah, you can literally communicate with anything using this. So now languages are just not an issue for you. So this one kind of gets subsumed into what the ratings for side bolstered knack. It doesn't increase those above an A, but this does contribute to the face roll, even the scouting roll. So you can communicate with your party, and if you're like splitting the party and some of your scouting, the others staying back, you can still communicate with them within a mile, which is great. So it helps there. So this helps you be a better scout, which is great. A little better at communicating, a little better party face. Moving on to Psychic Blades, also at level 3. You can manifest shimmering blades of psychic energy. When you take the attack action or make an opportunity attack, you can manifest a psychic blade in your free hand and make the attack with that blade. The magic blade has the following traits. It is a simple weapon. It does 1d6 psychic damage plus the ability modifier used for the attack roll. The weapon properties it has are finesse and thrown with a range of 60 to 120. So this is the best thrown weapon in the game now, right? Javelins have a range of 30, 120. And they're the only other one with a 120 max range, and this has a better short range than that. This is the best short range of any thrown weapon in the game, and ties with Javelin for the long range. Then it has a weapon mastery that they added to it in the 2024 version, which is Vex, and they clearly point out that you automatically have the mastery with this one. You don't have to spend one of your 2 weapon masteries you get from your rogue base class on this, so you already have Vex mastery. The blade vanishes after it hits or misses a target and leaves no mark if it deals damage. After you attack with the blade on your turn, you can make a melee or range attack with a second psychic blade as a bonus action on the same turn if your other hand is free to create it. The damage die of this bonus attack is 1d4 instead of 1d6. So this is cool, thematic. It very evocative of like Psylocke from Marvel, the Marvel X-Men mutants, which is a cool thing, right? She's a cool character. It's not really super powerful, but it is functional, useful, and very cinematic, which is what this is. It's cool and cinematic, but it's not very strong, unfortunately. Um, a rogue who just does two weapon fighting with two short swords gets almost all the same stuff. It's a 1d6 damage die. Yeah, it's going to be piercing instead of psychic, but most of the time, piercing is better than psychic, unfortunately. You can't throw a short sword. I mean, unless you use it as an improvised weapon, but you can just have daggers that you can throw, and those have a range of 30-60, I think. It's either 20-60 or 30-60 on the dagger. The dagger is also also finesse. Excuse me. Short swords have vex, so you can't. There's nothing really here that you can do with this that you can't also just do with regular weapons that the rogue already has access to. This one doesn't have nick, so you can't give yourself nick, but you could just not leave your second hand empty and just hold a dagger in your offhand, which is probably what you should do. Hold a dagger in your offhand, make your main attack with this, then have weapon mastery with the dagger so that you can make the nick attack with the dagger on the same turn, same action as this, and then leave your bonus action open for cunning actions or other things that you want to do. It's probably better to have a dagger in your hand all the time, at least one of your hands all the time anyway, because there are certain situations where you can't manifest the psychic blade as written, right? As written, there are some reaction attacks that you won't be able to use, and this one says opportunity attacks, not any reaction attack. So there are certain circumstances where you'll make a reaction attack or an attack as a reaction, and it won't qualify for this. You can't manifest a psychic blade anyway. Or if you do something like you want to do booming blade, true strike, green flame blade, those are not the attack action, so you can't manifest a psychic blade as part of them. You would have to have a weapon you're holding to use any of those. And for that, this is not nearly as good as it could have been. If they had done a few things like said, just frankly, you can manifest this during any time you can make a weapon attack, or anytime you can make an attack, you can manifest this, whether it's a reaction, a bonus action, or an action, and let you choose the damage type between, I don't know, piercing and psychic or something like that. Just give you an option, which I don't know, and just describe it as you solidify, coalesce the psychic energy into a hardened, field of force or something like that. I don't know. Give you two damage type options, because when you run into creatures that are resistant to psychic or immune to psychic, you're going to have a big problem. You're going to want, in this case, if you run the rules as written, you'll want to have a dagger, right? Ideally a magic dagger, so that you can, be effective against that creature. Now, you'll be effective against that creature, but you'll be losing most of your subclass benefits in combat by not using your psychic blades, which is the other bummer about this. Now, the other side of that one is that there are, in the 2024 monsters, there's only about, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 40 monsters that are resistant to psychic damage. There's 20 or less that are immune to psychic damage, and that's like what, 8 and 4%. So it's not a huge amount, it's not a huge exposure, but there are certain creature types that are more likely than others, right? Like constructs are the ones that are probably have the highest percentage of resistance to psychic damage and immunity to psychic damage. So just, you run up against a construct, make sure you've got that dagger handy. And then that brings us to the other problem with this, which is the rest of the party. Let's say that you're a party full of rogues. Well, the rest of the party is all finding magic weapons that's enhancing their martial capability. If you use a magic weapon, you're going to be removing your subclass for combat, most of your subclass features for combat, right? Because you're no longer using your psychic blade, you're using the magic weapon. But if you always only use your psychic blades, then you're never benefiting from a magic weapon like the rest of the party is. So the other thing they probably should have done here is just said, at least with soul blades, the homing strikes, and the Ren Mind, the later features, they should have said those also work with a magic dagger or some, magic weapon with a finesse property that you're, holding, something like that. Maybe make maybe have you create a psychic bond with it. For a 1-minute ritual, you can psychically bond with one of these, and now you can treat that as a psychic blade. They should have done something like that so that you're not left feeling out in the cold when everybody else is getting magic weapons and you can't use them. Or if you do use them, you're not using most of your subclass features for combat. And for that, I got to give this a B, right? It doesn't add direct damage. It doesn't really do anything you can't do anyway. It does make it certain things easier. You can switch between range throwing and melee without swapping any weapons. So it makes certain things easier. I'm going to give it a B, but I think that's a generous B for your skirmisher and ranged ratings for this Psychic Blades feature. It's definitely a B minus, maybe a C plus, but I'm going to leave it as a B. I think it's cool. I think it's thematic. I think it's fun, and it does make certain things. It's kind of like a lot of quality of life enhancements for the rogue. Like it just makes the playstyle you were going to have anyway just easier. It doesn't really increase your damage capability or anything like that. Moving on to level 9, which puts us into tier 2, you can see that I've updated these tables, and tier 2 for the base class is highlighted with colors. Everything else is grayed out. I do like to see the full context of everything, but I know that can be visually overwhelming for people, especially if you're not used to how I rank things. So I gray everything else out, and I hope that is like splitting the difference for you, making this easy to understand both ways. And then I've highlighted in color level 9 for the Soulknife Rogue. That takes us to Soul Blades. Cool name. Here's what it does. You can now use the following powers with your Psychic Blades. First, homing strikes. If you make an attack roll with a Psychic Blade and miss the target, you can roll one psionic energy die and add the number rolled to the attack. If this causes the attack to hit, the die is expended. So once again, if you still miss, then the die is not expended. So you might as well just try this all the time. Probably by this point, your reliable talent's probably making you succeed most of the time on your ability checks anyway. So your usage of your psionic energy dice has dropped really low. You might use one per day if you're doing a stealth mission. So to do your psychic whispers, then you might use one or two more on those rare ability checks that you still fail even with reliable talent, which is going to be rare. So probably in levels 7 and 8, you're probably like using half. You're probably not using all of your psionic energy dice. You're probably using half or less every day. So this is a much needed way to expend them and do something useful with them. Frankly, they should have given you something at level 3. Like probably whenever you hit, you can expend a psionic energy die, just roll it and add it to the damage. They should have just added that. Yes, that would have been a good thing to add. Just a way to dump psionic energy dice, increase your damage. A direct combat improvement for the Soulknife would have been great. Nevertheless, they didn't do that, so it's too late. Oh well. But this one's good. It is good, but not great. What it does is it increases the chance you're going to hit, because you will miss sometimes as a rogue, but rogues, one of the main things you're doing is trying to make sure you always have advantage on your attack roll. And because of that, you're going to miss rarely, right? You're either doing steady aim to make sure you have advantage, or you're doing, the run around a corner and hide and then step back out and attack, which would give you advantage. There's so many ways to get advantage. You can use your, Vex weapon mastery property, which you have on your psychic blades. You're doing all kinds of things to make sure you have advantage on the attack roll so that you hit. So it's actually not very common that rogues miss with their attack, which is important, because if they miss with one of their attacks, well, that's most of the time the only attack they get, and that means their damage is 0. Whereas other martial classes that have multiple attacks, if they miss with one of them, they're still doing 50% of their damage, or 25, or 75% of their damage, depending on what their build is and what their class is. Yeah, so this is nice. It's going to make sure it's probably virtually going to guarantee that you don't miss. Like your chances of missing probably drop from like 10% to like 1%, which is nice, but it doesn't activate any additional way for you to increase your damage. It's giving you no net damage increases. So probably the Soulknife, I'm guessing when I do the DPR comparison between all of the subclasses at the end, I'm guessing the Soulknife is going to come in last. We'll see, though. We'll see. The other sub feature you get here is Psychic Teleportation. As a bonus action, you manifest a Psychic Blade, expend one Psionic Energy die, and roll it and throw the blade at an unoccupied space you can see a number of feet away, equal to 10 times the number rolled, and then you teleport to the space and the blade vanishes. So positives here. Yeah, rogues love teleports. Bonus action teleport, fantastic. That's way better than an action teleport for a rogue. Good stuff, right? This will help you get out of melee if you want to be out of melee. Like if you want to play a skirmisher where you run in attack and get out, well, you can just use this now. Now, is that better than disengage? Most of the time, disengage is probably going to be the one you want to do, because then it at least doesn't expend a psionic energy die. But if you need the extra movement, or you're grappled, or there's terrain problems, you can just teleport, which is great. The downside of this is it's random, and not just it's like punishingly random, right? You might roll a 1, and therefore you only teleport 10 feet, and that was your whole bonus action. That's still better than nothing, but that might not get you out of the creature's reach. It might not get you out of the terrain problems, and you can't know ahead of time if you're going to roll a 1 or the average or the max, right? And you have an equal chance of rolling any of those because it's just a straight die roll of a d6, anywhere between a d6 and a d12. Well, you're level 13, so it's at least a d10, right? But you might still roll a 1 on that d10. Sorry, you're level 9, which means it's at least it's a d8. So you might still roll a 1 on that d8, and then you got far less movement than if you had done a dash as your cunning action, which would at least be doubling your movement speed, right? This is another one where it felt like they crowbarred in a way to say, oh, we really need to make them roll the die. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that we have a psionic energy die. So let's like crowbar it in here and have the teleportation range vary by that. And I don't think it works very well. It's kind of like a weak mobility enhancement because of the lack of just the fact that you can't guarantee or count on a minimum distance. Maybe they should have done something. And it's also interesting with the Soulknife Rogue that they didn't do anything to tie it to one of your mental ability scores. And psionics tends to be connected to intelligence. So like the Psi Warrior Fighter, theirs is connected to intelligence. You have no features here that are connected to intelligence. Probably they should have connected to intelligence and just done something like your teleportation is equal to your intelligence modifier plus the die roll. So you have if you got a +2 or +3 on your intelligence modifier, you're at least going plus a minimum roll of 1. You're at least teleporting 30 feet, right? Now you might teleport 100 feet or 150 feet. Can you get that high D12? Yeah, you can get 150 feet, which would be cool, but you at least have 30 and you can count on something. And then like the Psychic Blade should add your intelligence modifier to the damage rolls, probably. They should have done a few things like that, and I don't think that would have harmed this one. Actually, not only harmed it, rogues have an extra feat, so you have more capacity for a secondary or tertiary ability score than other classes, everyone except the fighter. And this one just needed more. It just needed more stuff, more things. And I don't love the execution of those psychic whispers and psychic teleportation. Feels like they crowbarred in this roll, and it doesn't really fit, and it's clunky. All right, so homing strikes is an A for both the skirmisher and ranged rolls. That is going to increase your damage, probably like 10 or 15%. Psychic teleportation, I'm going to give it a B for mobility. If you had a minimum teleportation distance of 30 feet, I would have given it an A. Moving on to level 13 now, we get the feature Psychic Veil. You can weave a veil of psychic static to mask yourself. As a magic action, you gain the invisible condition for 1 hour or until you dismiss the effect. No action required. This invisibility ends immediately after you deal damage to a creature or you force a creature to make a saving throw. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you expend a psionic energy die and no action required to restore your use of it. So this is an interesting one. It's basically casting the invisibility spell. Lasts 1 hour, same duration. It doesn't use your concentration. That's probably the one upside to Psychic Veil. Otherwise, it's virtually identical. It breaks when you deal damage to a creature or force it to make a saving throw. Note that this doesn't break if you cast a spell. So this has fewer break conditions than the invisibility spell does, or even your hidden, your hidden state does. Right? If you take the hide action using your stealth skill, you have the invisible condition from that too, and that breaks under more conditions. So this breaks under fewer conditions, but the most important conditions are you deal damage or force a creature to make a saving throw, and then it breaks. You get 1 free use of it, and then you get 1 more use of it for every time you want to, if you just expend a psionic energy die. So, and by this level, Psychic Veil, you're level 13, you would have 10 psionic energy dice for the day. So if you just use them only on this, that's like 11 castings. You get 1 free plus 10. That's 11 castings of the invisibility spell. And even if you had 11 castings of the invisibility spell without sharing or expending, sharing that resource with anything else, this still wouldn't be great. This is, you're casting a spell that full casters have had access to since level 3. Half casters have had access to it since level 5, if any of them have access to it. There's ways to get it, right? Anybody can get it at level 4 by taking Shadow Touched feat. So cool idea, leans into the fantasy. It just isn't great. Honestly, maybe it should have been something like it lasts 1 minute and doesn't break. Like it's just straight up 1 minute, no matter what. And you can attack as many times as you want. So it's more like greater invisibility, which is a spell that full casters get at 7th level and half casters would get at 13th level. So at least you'd be on par with like the Eldritch Knight, right? Because the Eldritch Knight can cast at level 13 greater invisibility. No, he doesn't get it till level 19. It would be like the Ranger can get greater invisibility at level 13. So at least you'd be kind of like on par with the Ranger, but only in that one aspect that you could be invisible and attack. I don't even remember if the Ranger gets greater invisibility. I think they do. I want to say they do. So yeah, this is another disappointing one. It's great for scouting because scouting doesn't break it, right? But as far as combat goes, this is pretty weak. You're going to get one attack that gives you, advantage, which is super easy for you to do anyway. You got Vex, you got steady aim, you got, hide. All of those are ways that you can give yourself advantage, and this is not a good use of your psionic energy dice to just give yourself an advantage. Now, if you don't know combat's going to start and you just want to be ready, make sure you have advantage on this. Will give you advantage on the initiative roll because you'll be invisible. It'll give you advantage on your first attack, which is great. So it's fine to use in between combats. You might as well be invisible between every combat. So regardless of whether or not you're doing a solo scouting mission or not, just you have it's so easy to use all these, and you're probably not even expending all of your psionic energy dice on homing strikes to make sure you hit because you're not going to miss 10 times a day. If you have the average campaign average, and I'm talking, average situation, not the end end layer fights where dungeon crawl where you're gonna have so many more combats, but the average for a whole campaign is like 3 combats per day and 3 rounds of combat each. You're at most making 9 attacks. You're probably gonna hit, you're probably gonna have advantage on most of those, which means you're gonna hit on 7 or 8 of them. So you're using 1 or 2 of your psionic energy dice for homing strikes. You're maybe using 1 or 2 for side bolstered knack when your reliable talent doesn't succeed. So you've still got more than half you're never using. You might as well just be invisible between every combat. Like, it's not super strong, but go for it. It's going to help a little bit, and that's great. Every little bit helps. So yeah, this is a C feature and remember, that doesn't mean it's bad and you shouldn't use it. It means it adds C level of functionality on top of what you already are as a rogue, right? As a rogue, you're already an A. I rank you as an A level skirmisher and ranged, and you're adding C worth of more skirmisher and ranged features on top of that. So you might not even notice. Maybe, you probably notice, but it's not going to be a big damage difference. But this is an A for scouting. Moving on to level 17, we got our last feature. We're now in tier 4 for the base class. This is Rend Mind. You can sweep your psychic blades through a creature's mind. When you use your psychic blades to deal sneak attack damage to a creature, you can force that target to make a wisdom saving throw based on your dexterity score. Still interesting that it's not based on your intelligence score. Technically, that makes this a little stronger, but I feel like if they had based some things on the intelligence modifier, they could have added more things to increase your damage. I don't know. If the save fails, the target has a stun condition for 1 minute, which, wow, that's huge. The stun target repeats the save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you expend 3 psionic energy dice. No action required to restore your use of it. So this is a good control effect, right? Stunned is a good condition to impose. They can still move, but nothing else. They can't take any actions. They can't take any reactions. They're incapacitated. So their concentration is automatically broken if they're concentrating on anything. The only thing they can literally do is just use their movement speed, and that's it. Excuse me, which is a change from 2014. In 2014, stunned prevented you from moving. Now it doesn't. And it lasts a whole minute. That's strong. They get resaves, which is fair. And you can do this once for free, and you can do it again if you just spend 3 psionic energy dice. And you will have, by this level, 12 psionic energy dice. So if you only spend your psionic energy dice on this and you don't get any short rest, you can do this 5 times in a day. That's a pretty big deal. Easily enough to do it once per combat, have a few left over for a homing strikes, maybe have 1 left over for a side bolstered knack if you actually need it. You're going to succeed so often, and hopefully you're not the only one in the party making ability checks, right? The rest of the party should be carrying some of the weight too. So hopefully they're succeeding on some of them. And then you never actually spend any psionic energy dice on side bolstered knack, which is probably going to be the case after level 7, maybe level 10. I don't know. Somewhere around there, you're going to stop. You'll just never spend psionic energy dice on side bolstered knack. So you're going to have a lot left over. And this is a pretty good thing to use it on, right? Yeah, good control effect. I give this an A as a control feature. Now that's an A as its feature on its own, But you can see that I rank them as a C as a controller overall, and that's because this is their only additional control feature that they have, and it's gained very late. So when I rank the subclass overall, I also average them out across all the levels. So they're a C rank controller across all the levels because they only get one control feature, and that's gained at 17, which is very late. And if they gained more features along the way, control features along the way, or they gained more control features at 17 even, maybe I would have ranked them higher overall. But this is the only one, so I'm going to give them a C. But this is a good feature, good, on its own, a very good control feature, very powerful to use. Great for boss fights. Sure, they might use their legendary resistance, but great. Like you spent no additional action economy, you gave up no damage, and you still forced them to spend a legendary resistance. This is awesome, right? It's way better than having like the casters in the party expending spell slots and their action to cast a spell that the monster is just going to save against, right? So the casters in the party should not use save or suck spells against a boss with legendary resistances. Now, maybe they use other things that deal damage and also force a save, and that as a way to force still, add some value as a caster. So you're still going to be doing damage to some things and still force them to burn a legendary resistance. But this is way better than that because this is a very important thing that they do not want to fail against. So, and you're going to still do full damage, right? It doesn't take away from your sneak attack in any way. So you're still doing full damage. It's just you burned a little bit of resources that you frankly weren't using most of anyway. And if that forces them to spend this legendary resistance, fantastic. And then you can keep doing this, right? If you haven't spent any Psionic Energy dice yet, you can do this to that legendary boss 5 times and burn every one of their legendary resistances. So this is a good feature. All right, so I aggregate everything together, and I got to go off screen so you can see everything. I've got the 3 tables now. The top one is just the base class by itself. The second table is just the subclass by itself, and you can see the overall ranking I've given the subclass is a B. I do think it's compared to the other subclasses not as strong, but I do think it's strong enough that you'll be just fine. If you play this, you'll have fun. It's probably the easiest of all the rogue subclasses to use now. Maybe assassin is okay. Assassin and this one are probably the easiest to use. But this is definitely going to be doing less damage than the assassin and less damage than probably every one of them. This is going to be, I assume, last in damage. The overall ranking for the Soulknife subclass is a B for skirmisher, as in it's adding B level of skirmisher functionality. It's adding a B level of range functionality. It's adding a C level of controller functionality, an A level of scout functionality, an A level of face functionality, an A for knowledge, and that's because of bolstered Nask, and that's only if you choose some knowledge skills, right, that you can use it with. And then it's giving you a B level of mobility functionality as well. And then the last table is if you bring it all together and say, let's overlay the subclass on top of the base class, how does it change things? And the only thing I changed there is that one cell under tier 4 controller, which is to rank it up to a B. And you might be saying, well, they were an A as a skirmisher in range, and they were adding a B on top of that. Why doesn't it go higher? So keep in mind that when I rank base classes, it's only base classes relative to other base classes. And when I rank a base class plus a subclass, it's now a higher scale. So and I don't actually have a number scale under the covers, but let's say I did, the base class would be something like, yes, it's ranked from D to S, but the scale is 0 to 50. And when you're talking base class plus subclass, the scale is now 0 to 75. And if we were talking like a complete build with feats and spells and everything built in a background, then the scale is 0 to 100. Okay, so the scale increased, and so you still maintain that A rank as a skirmisher or ranged as a Soulknife rogue. You didn't lose ground. Like if it didn't give you any of those features, you might have lost ground compared to other rogues. And it's adding an A level of scout and face functionality, but you were already S tier because of reliable talent. So, and there's nowhere to go once you're S. Like S is the cap, so you're stuck at S. And frankly, like I've said so many times, bolstered Knack probably is going to be hardly used after you get reliable talent at level 7. So it's probably going to have minimal impact no matter what. So the only thing that really has a material impact is in tier 4, that Rend Mind feature is going to make you a B level controller. And you might be saying, well, you ranked the feature as an A. Yes, the feature on its own is an A, but as the only feature you have for control that is being added by this base class or by this subclass. Okay, you've got some other control features from your base class, cunning strikes, weapon masteries, things like that. This is the only control feature you're getting from your subclass. So it is, as a package, you're not an A yet. If you had multiple control features on top of Ren Mine, then this would be an A package. And frankly, to get to an A, you've got to have AoE control, right? Single target control. I just don't rank higher than a B. And this is about as good as it gets as a single target control feature because it's stun condition for 1 minute, very good. That's the highest rank you're going to get for a package, for a whole thing, right? And that's all I got for the Soulknife Rogue. It is one of my favorite fantasies. I love psionics in general. So I love this one, the idea of this one, the fantasy of it. The mechanics fall a little bit short, and that's a bummer because this is one I love so much, but it is still fun to play. You'll have a good time. If you're in a party of super optimizers, you might feel behind, but not every party is that way. And if you don't like playing that way, maybe don't play with that party. uh, that's why it's always good to talk with the other players. And remember, I have all of these materials in my Google Drive, which is linked in every one of these videos. And if you don't have enough D&D in your life, I've got my Start Playing Games link there. I've got my Discord username, so you can find me on Discord and we can hang and chat and you can join my server. I had to remove the Discord, just open invite link because too many scammer and scam bots were joining, which is just, not okay. And, that's not the kind of server. I don't want to be micromanaging that all the time. And I don't want my, people on my server to be subjected to that. So unfortunately, you only get my Discord username. You are going to have to DM me and have a brief conversation to prove you're a human before I'll invite you to my server. But then you're in. And I do love D&D. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. And remember to be cool when you play D&D because it's a game. And the only point of it is for fun. And these people are your friends, or they could become your friends. So please be cool. Let me know what you think of the information I shared here in the comments. Catch you next time.